Kevin, tell me when you're ready.
Okay, give me 1 second. You're good to go.
I just see a blank screen. We still on?
Yeah, I'll get that going in a minute. But you can start.
Okay.
That's okay.
Good evening. Welcome to the June 28th, 2023 meeting of the Town of Southampton Conservation Board. In accordance with the Town Board's adoption of Local Law Number 14 of 2022, the Board's meetings are being held both in person at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. The link to participate in this meeting via video conference can be found on the town's website at the Town Clerk's Agendas and Meetings portal. You can watch the live stream video and submit written comments for the public record through the town website. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during this meeting, then please click the raise hand icon. As a reminder to all applicants, agents, and members of the public who wish to speak at the meeting, please state your name and Hamlet residence for the record. Thank you. And I invite you all to join together for the salute to the flag.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What is your pleasure on the minutes of June 14th, 2023?
Move to accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearings, A 019125, Jeffrey W. Howell. Have they been stamped in?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
You may present your application.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Susan Brierly. I'm from Dewey's Planning, and I'm representing Jeffrey and Kelly Howell this evening. With me tonight, I have our project engineer, David Rhodes, and our architect, Gary Steluka, should you have questions about those portions of the project. The subject property, 3659 Noyak Road, has been in the Howell family since the early 1930s. The property was purchased by Lemuel Howell and included properties known today as 3659 and 3651 Noyak Road. The original lot was subdivided in 1975 by Lemuel and Trace Howell to create two single and separate residential properties that exist today. The original house was an old tool shed that was rumored to have been brought down the beach and floated to the property in the early 1930s. By the mid-1950s, small additions and improvements had been made to the house, which represent the current structure. This home and the adjacent property to the west, 3651 Noyak Road, have served three generations of the extended family of Lemuel and Therese Howell, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. The current conditions consist of a one-story, three-bedroom cottage on a block foundation with a screened porch. It sits 26.6 feet from the edge of the bulkhead, a 43-square-foot shed, 41 feet from the bulkhead, a block cesspool, 40 feet from the bulkhead, and a wood retaining wall 17 feet from the bulkhead. Access to the property is complicated. There is a small compromised parking area in the south corner of the parcel and a collapsed wooden stairway to the house that descends approximately 25 feet to the rear of the cottage through a naturally forming ravine. The current structures on the property are in poor to fair condition. Though they are habitable, they're not compliant with current code standards. The septic system is assumed to be a stacked block cesspool with no septic tank on the east side of the cottage, and there is no drainage management on the site to speak of. The property has a very significant grade change, approximately 30 feet, with severe slopes and a ravine down the center of the lot. The vegetation includes a handful of mature trees forming an upper canopy. They include beech, oak, maple, and holly trees. The understory of this property is mostly absent. The earth appears to be polished by runoff from Noack Road. This is demonstrated in the photos we handed out. The photos show pretty much the same images from, I believe it was 2021 and this year. One is in December, one is in May, and you can see there's very little difference between what's in the understory between winter and summer months. The base of many of the trees show signs of erosion, and there's also evidence that the soil from the embankment behind the house is shifting, depositing near the wooden wall on the water side of the house. And currently, approximately 5 feet behind the house is a deteriorating retaining wall of vertical logs with a wire fence. The wire fence catches debris during severe rain events and keeps it from accumulating against the house. There are also non-native invasive vines present on the property. Along the east property line, there's ivy growing and compromising several mature trees. And along Noack Road, a thriving mass of Akevia quinata, or chocolate vine, is present. This is a very invasive plant native to Korea, China, and Japan. The chocolate vine is migrating to the interior of the property and strangling many of the mature trees. We've submitted several options and revisions since our original submission in the fall of 2019. We've consulted with the Conservation Department, and we've met on site with Mr. Shea. Our first submission was for a new residence of approximately 2,760 square feet, a large parking area with extensive retaining walls. The proposal conformed to all requirements of Chapter 330 of the Southampton Town Zoning Code. No variances were anticipated. The proposal called for the grubbing of the entire site. This was dictated by an anticipated construction project, which was carefully developed by our project engineer, David Rhodes, to create staging areas that would allow for the safe ingress and egress onto the site from Noack Road and would transition the crew, materials, and equipment from the street level to the construction site. Over the last several years, we have reevaluated our proposal and prepared several variations to address Conservation Department concerns. Our current proposal is pursuant to a site meeting on May 27th of 2022 with the Conservation Department, the project architect, and the project engineer, where it was suggested that if we, that it was suggested based on site conditions and adjacent development, that if we would consider moving the house forward to be more consistent with adjacent properties, and the current development, that we could better accommodate the house size being proposed while protecting the integrity of the bluff face. Our current proposal is to construct a 57 linear feet of retaining wall to support an 867 square foot circular parking area adjacent to Noack Road, to provide ingress and egress onto the public road and access for emergency vehicles should that be necessary. Our original proposed driveway was 2,444 square feet. To install a septic leaching field and drainage structures in the parking area, combining these two areas represents less site disturbance, places the leaching area in the most conforming location on the site, and introduces drainage to prevent further erosion of the face of the bluff. We're also proposing barge access to demolish the existing house and remove the debris by barge to appropriate upland disposal locations. Barge access is also proposed to access the construction site at the foot of the bluff and construct a new modest 4-bedroom home with a footprint of 1,470 square feet. The total gross floor area would be 2,540 square feet. This is 213 square feet less than our previous proposal, and is approximately 32 feet from the bulkhead. It extends 16 feet back from where the existing house sits today. This represents an increase in footprint of only 758 square feet. The construction area of the house is to be defined by the installation of driven sheet pile, and excavation will be limited to this area. This eliminates the need to over-excavate for the construction of the foundation. A 377 square foot first floor deck, which would include a screen porch 20 feet from the bulkhead, a 247 square foot second floor deck. An IA septic system is proposed on the east side of the new home and will be brought to the site and installed by barge 37 feet from the bulkhead. All utilities and waste lines will be installed by torpedo technology to minimize disturbance to the natural topography between the driveway and the house. A proposed access stairs is to be constructed, lastly, connecting the house to the parking area. The intention that is the area between the house and the parking area should remain mostly undisturbed. Finally, a planting plan will be developed that addresses the removal and management of the invasive vines, restoration of a native understory, and the preservation of the mature trees where possible. This proposal provides reasonable access to and from the property off of Noyak Road and to the new home, and includes an upgraded IA septic system and leaching field that is at level with the road, achieving required separations to groundwater, and is as far from the tidal wetlands as possible while maintaining necessary setbacks from utilities and property lines. The proposal incorporates a comprehensive drainage plan that would capture all runoff and direct it to dry wells, preventing it from reaching the surface waters of Noyak Bay. The IA septic system and the drainage represent a vast improvement over the current site conditions. Additionally, this proposal, if approved, would provide the Howell family with safe ingress and egress from the site and access for emergency vehicles, which does not exist today. The scale of the proposal is consistent with the immediate neighborhood of similar waterfront parcels. To the east and west of the subject site, we have reviewed town records for 11 adjacent parcels, 6 of which have been either rebuilt or renovated with the benefit of current review. That's demonstrated in the chart and the area map we submitted. The pattern of development in this section of Noyak Road is also consistent with our proposal, providing street-level parking, terraced access to the structures at the foot of the bluff, as seen on the aerial submitted. Construction on this site is going to be challenging, preservation of existing conditions even more so. Mr. and Mrs. Howell recognize this, and in an effort to maintain a natural topography in some portions of the property, to the greatest extent possible, we have developed this 2 points of access approach. The Howells have no intention of compromising the environment with this proposal. The Howell family has a history in this community of acting in the interest of the environment. They did sell an 8.7 acre parcel at 940 Brick Hill Road in 2015 to the town for 1/3 of the appraised value for the purpose of preservation. Though Jeffrey Howell is now the primary owner of this parcel, his intention is to continue the spirit of Lemuel Howell. The proposal is for the benefit of Jeff and Kelly's extended family, including their 2 young children, 5 siblings, multiple nieces and nephews, hoping to enjoy the property for many more generations of Howells.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. There is a preliminary advisory report on record as part of your file dated November 3rd, 2021. That report, however, was prepared to address a earlier project plan for this site. As well described by the applicant, that site poses a lot of challenges. As indicated, the property is marked by very steep forested slopes, creating issues not only with respect to demolition and construction, but with regard to siting of the new home, and ensuring that the hillside is not compromised. Just to give you a better sense of the existing slopes on the property, what I'm gonna hand around is an existing conditions survey that the applicant had provided as part of a construction methodology protocol that I had requested. Initially, when the application had come forward, recognizing the frontage on the Noyak Bay, and the requirements of Chapter 325.
Sorry.
The applicant had come forward with a plan that cited the new home further back on the property. Consistent with this board's policies and standards, they were looking to maximize construction setbacks and buffers. This is not a very large lot, so the lot itself poses some challenges, not only with respect to the topography and wetlands and requirements, Chapter 325, but with respect to complying with the dimensional setbacks as per the town building and zoning code. Typically, when an application like this is made, where we have an existing bulkhead line along the shore, we would, if we were looking at level ground, we would probably look to site the construction at least 40 feet back from the bulkhead, and then establish a buffering zone at a minimum about 20 to 25 feet on bayfront, such as this. But that strategy poses a lot of issues on this property because of the steep terrain. The site meeting that we had was most beneficial in that it gave us an opportunity to try and be creative in terms of how to approach planning for this site. And some of the additional parameters that had to be addressed included the overlay of FEMA flood zones, inclusive of a limit of moderate wave action, which initially crossed over a part of the house on the earlier plans, which would have necessitated elevating the house on pilings. I think the applicant now has shifted the house a little bit further landward to try and avoid the need for piling installation. When we met at the site and I looked at the conditions and the severity of the slopes. And as described by the applicant, the scattered large trees on the property, as well as surrounding homes. I quickly recognized that a better approach for this property, notwithstanding our standard goal of maximizing setbacks, would be to build a new home at the toe of the forested bluff in the approximate location of the existing home. The benefit of that is that that area is level, with the exception of the immediate rear of the house, and it enables the applicant to look at building a home without cutting severely into the sloping ground on the property. It would also position the new home aligned with the existing homes both to the east and west of this property. One of the consequences of that site meeting was also that, notwithstanding the initial proposal to try and use construction cranes positioned atop on Noack Road to proceed with demolition and construction, we quickly recognized that a better approach would be to see if the demolition and new construction could be accomplished by barge. As indicated by the applicant, that is the way they are looking to proceed, which makes sense for a property like this, where the steep terrain greatly inhibits construction access. One of the goals at the same time was to try and come forward with a plan whose footprint would be reasonable, recognizing the constraints of the property, not only the flood zones, the close proximity to the open water and wetlands, but the severe terrain as well. As indicated, the existing home is a one-story. As recommended, the home that's being proposed at this time would be a two-story. And I think it was also indicated that the home would have at least a partial rooftop deck, which was one of my early recommendations as well, because it better enables you to use the limited space to its greatest use in terms of future living and exterior use on the property. So as a consequence of the site meeting and a lot of communications back and forth with the applicant has indeed now come forward with a plan that would site the new home at the base of the sloped forested terrain, pretty consistent with the location of the existing home and the adjacent homes. That, of course, positions the new home very close to the water and inhibits our ability to require greater setbacks in terms of construction. Right now, the closest setbacks for the seaside decks and screen porch on the property would be about 20 feet landward of the bulkhead. As we typically see for a level ground, an absolute minimum setback of 40 feet from a bulkhead and a minimum buffer of 20 to 25 feet. I indicated to the applicant that the significantly less wetland construction buffer setbacks that whose approval would need to be sought could be well offset and mitigated by preservation of the forested hillside and steep terrain as much as possible. I also worked closely with the applicant on the design of the sanitary system, which positions a major part of the septic system, which will be an IA, up top alongside the road, with the IA tank at the toe of the forested slopes, thereby necessitating the use of pumps. So I think the sanitary layout for this property generally makes a lot of sense for this property. It does appear that it may need a variance from the Suffolk County Department of Health Services, not only due to the close proximity of the septic system to the water than is typically sought by county health, but also because the retaining walls that need to be built on the upper slope to surround that septic system and allow for the necessary modifications, I believe typically have to be sited at least 10 feet from the nearest leaching pools. And the current plan shows a 5-foot separation. So that's something that will need to be worked on. We had at our site meeting and through various emailed communications, we had also agreed upon citing the pervious drive up top, and then creating an elevated walkway that would descend from the parking area to the home lower on the slope. So the concept which is being put forward tonight for this property is generally consistent with the concept that I was looking for, but I still have significant concerns regarding the size of the home. Again, the existing home, the footprint for that home is 667 square feet, and the footprint for the new home would be at least twice that size, and the survey indicates the house footprint itself at 1483, and then the screen porch at 151 square feet. If we had a lot of suitable land to work with in designing the home, I would have no issue with the greater size of the home. But if you look at the current plan that's before you, what the building of a much larger house on this property requires is significant cutting into a major part of that wooded slope. Although we had asked for it, I know this is a work in progress, the plans are not putting forward a clear grading plan, nor showing the extent of clearing and site disturbance that would be necessary in order to construct this home in a manner where it would cut into the lower slope. We had spoken about at the site about providing for a larger footprint, but basically squaring off the existing home. But I had seen as more appropriate for this site a footprint, maybe maxing out at about 1,000 square feet, and designed in a manner so that we could avoid cutting into that slope as much as possible. So what I'm looking for at this time is, I think we're making a lot of progress in terms of the right approach for this property, but I think the size of the home needs to be, the footprint of the home needs to be significantly scaled back. And it's a little bit unclear as I stand here whether or not the applicant is asking for a full second story, a partial second story. My interest would be in maxing out the second story as much as possible to give them as much livable area as at least close to what they desire, and thereby creating greater opportunity to reduce the actual footprint of the home. They did, as requested by me, they have put forward several construction protocol reports, and although the report does talk about various retaining walls and shoring walls and other measures that'll be taken to try and contain the modification of the slope and prevent erosion and siltation as much as possible. I'm at this time not convinced that methodology that is put forward is going to prevent significant impacts to the forested slope. One of the part of the magnificence of the Noack Bay area is the backdrop of wooded slopes. And the plan that is being put forward at this time would require a major modification to the slope on this, in this area, which I think would greatly change that scenic backdrop for Noack Bay, and would be at odds with coming forward with a more environmentally sound building plan for this site. So, you know, I'm not sure where things stand in terms of the architectural style of the home that they're looking to build, but you know, I had indicated that in light of the FEMA elevation requirements, the fragile nature of this site and the severe constraints of this site, that it might make sense to go with more of a modern home where you can have a sizable flat roof and rooftop deck that would afford great views of Noack Bay. There might even be an opportunity to put a hot tub or a small dipping pool on that rooftop as well. And that's something that we've looked to work with landowners in constrained situations such as this to provide as much benefits in terms of future exterior use as possible. There is need for additional information regarding other aspects of this plan. It's still unclear as to whether or not the retaining walls that are being proposed are going to necessitate variances as a portion of the retaining wall exceeds 6 feet in height. At the same time, I recognize that they perhaps have no other option but to build retaining walls of that height, recognizing the difficult terrain in order to support that sanitary system. But we need, in order to increase comfort level, we need to get some feedback from the chief building inspector as to whether or not retaining walls of this size are likely to be approved at this property. Sometimes what we look to do on a site like this, where an applicant is looking for a larger footprint that would cut into a slope, sometimes you can utilize the level ground for a two-story structure and then have your second floor extend or cantilever out towards the slope so that the home is built in a manner that's more compatible with the existing terrain, rather than having to carve out a flat footprint into that slope. While as indicated, you know, if this was a level piece of land, typically our approach would be to get the home about 40 feet back from the bulkhead and look for the establishment of at least a 20-foot buffer. Not only does that approach not work for this property because of the terrain, but it also would pose significant issues in terms of buildability on this lot due to the required dimensional setbacks from the road. That is, if the house was sited further away from the water, they would need likely significant variances from the required dimensional setbacks from the road. So when a property like this comes forward, my goal is always to try and find a way to work with the applicant to put forward a plan that meets their goals in terms of desired living area, but to be as creative as possible so that the home is built in a manner that is more compatible with the environment. Notwithstanding the significant concerns that I expressed to the applicant this morning, I also expressed to the applicant that I'd be happy to continue to work with them on revisions to this plan in the interest of coming back to this board with a plan that I feel we all can support. So, but at this time, I think the applicant needs to cut back the footprint of the house in order to avoid cutting into that slope behind the existing terrain as much as possible. You know, as far as native planting, invasive plants and all that, I'm sure that I can work well with the applicant in bringing forward a plan that works great for the site. But right now, I think this plan needs additional work. And maybe the best approach would be for me to meet with the applicant and their architects again on the site with this plan and see if there's a way to cut that first floor footprint back in a manner that's more compatible with the terrain and wetlands protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. I have a question for you. And who are the people with you on your team?
We have the architect and the engineer here this evening.
You got everybody.
I do. I came armed.
I want some numbers. You're looking for a 1,483 square foot footprint.
Yes, that's what it says on the survey. My numbers from the architectural plans are 14, slight difference. It's not much different, but a little bit smaller than that.
What are your numbers?
What did I do with my thing? Seem to have lost my numbers. There it is. I have 1,470 square feet for the footprint, 2,540 for the total gross floor area. And I just wanted to point out that in our construction protocol that we submitted, our whole intention in the way we developed this with Mr. Rhodes is to minimize disturbance to the bluff. Our first proposal really required destruction of the bluff. The way we build things and the topography indicated that we needed to provide staging platforms at different levels so that we could safely access the construction site. So using the barge allows us to pull the house a little bit closer to the bulkhead, which I think is terrific. If you look at that area, you'll see that all those houses, they're really on the water. They're very much closer to the bulkhead than what we had originally proposed. their hardscape and their improvements are between the house and the bulkhead. So if we come in from the water and we use sheet piling, and David Rhodes can speak to this better than I can, I'm not an engineer. My understanding is that if we drive the sheet piling in a defined location and we excavate inside the sheet piling, we do not over-excavate, which was one of our challenges last time with our first proposal. We needed to create, David, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, a layback of the soil so that we could safely work and create foundations without the soil collapsing in on us. So that was how we came up with this new approach of coming in from the water using sheet piling. The other retaining wall up that's supporting the driveway, I can't imagine another way to do this. If you look at the properties along that road, they all have these reasonable sized parking areas, 2-3 car parking areas that you pull in and pull out forward because it's just such a dangerous road and it's hazardous in that area. The retaining wall is very large. My understanding from dealing with the building department in the past is that a variance wouldn't be required for that wall because it faces into the property and it works with the natural terrain. But of course, I'm happy to meet with them and discuss that, and we'll go through that process when we get to that point. If there's variances, we're going to need a variance if this is approved from, I think it's our front yard setback, which is the water side. But I think that's the only variance we need. If you have any questions for David or Mr. Steluca regarding septic or
I have
architectural
a question
design.
for you and perhaps for one of the others.
Sure.
Marty alluded to an efficiency of sorts to reduce the cutting into the bluff by maximizing the square footage of the second story. In other words, every bit of first story make a second story, so you can perhaps reduce the footprint.
I understand.
Are you open to that?
I'm going to defer to the architect. I was not in the design process with the family, so Gary, would you?
My name's Gary Steluca. I live in Sag Harbor too. Actually, right down the road, Spring Lane. I developed a house, renovated a house about 10 years ago. So I'm very aware of the site. I drive down the road every day and I'm looking right at the site. I'm aware of the traffic patterns. That's why we went for a driveway that works like this so they can get in and out. It's kind of on a curve. It's a dangerous spot. In terms of, there are 2 bedrooms upstairs and there's 2 bedrooms downstairs and a great room. The bedrooms 10 by 12, they're not large rooms. They're not huge. And there's 3 bathrooms, I think, in it. We kept trying to keep it as tight as possible, but setbacks and all forced us to do that, of course. And they're not looking for a mansion or anything. When we talked about architecturally, do you want a modern kind of design, or do you want something traditional? Said, we want traditional. We want gables. We want, trim. We want action. We want a Hamptons house. So we never discussed going up on roof decks or swimming pools on the roof. Mr. Howell was here for about 5 days a couple weeks ago, and I know he was in the bay more than once. This is his memory. He grew up here. He still wants to have that connection with the bay. So that's why he wanted his great room at the first floor, a deck that he could go out on, and the buffer zone then. So he doesn't want a contemporary cantilevered swimming pools on the roof kind of house. So we came up with this design. When we get to the point of showing you the real elevations, they have gabled roofs, they have detail. It's more of traditional
The
Hamptons
question
house.
I'm looking for, which I'm still trying to figure out what you're saying, because I haven't found it yet, is would you be able to design this house and have the second story and the first story be the same square footage? So if we take the 2,540 square foot living space and divide that half and half, upstairs and downstairs, would that work? That'd be a 1,270 square foot footprint, first story, and 1,270 second story. Can you make that work?
Trying to think of the way the plan would work. See, we made the upper floor smaller, because you're coming down this flight from the parking area, entering right in here, and the actual square footage of the second floor, this this is the footprint of the first floor. The second floor, there's no house there, because we wanted to minimize the aspect and the view of the house from the road. So, it, to move bedrooms upstairs, you'd end up with the same footprint pretty much. You would just move them from below to above the bedrooms, because you're gonna have to move 2 bedrooms, and they're gonna have to move, if they're, I don't see how you can get that equal business. If you have a great room and 2 bedrooms, and then 2 bedrooms and the stairways and everything that's required, I don't think they're gonna fit over each other perfectly like that. And then you'd have, I've looked at the plan a million times, I don't know how you would do that. To get in what you need in a house, you know, bathrooms, kitchen, storage. So these are kind of minimized spaces already, the way we've approached it.
This concept does not reduce the square footage of the floor space in the house.
You're trying to just get a perfect stack,
Uh,
and that would make the footprint smaller conceptually.
The way, the benefit is, as was expressed, the sensitive nature of this parcel, as you talked about, is that very steep slope. So, we're wondering how we can, not create more problems by digging into that slope, creating potential, erosion and other.
That's why we took Mr. Shea's idea of pulling the house more to the water and using the sheet piling, so we're not digging into the slope. We have to create that area up there for the parking and the septic. So that area has to be sheet piled, and that's only that area required for that usage, that, the machine, you know, the septic and the driving. So there's no work being done in this area. This thing's pretty much gonna cantilever right over this walkway to hit the house. So the slope is like in here. And actually, if you stand on the bluff, it's not much bigger than this area. It's not a huge space. And it's been eroded by runoff from Noyak and both sides, and it's just eroding away. The trees on there, we're looking at those pictures, you'll see, there's a holly tree about this big. I think it's the holly, or a beech. And all its roots are exposed because it's been eroding for 50 years around there from runoff from the street. If we do this system, we're gonna be able to maintain the bluff, and we're gonna be able to plant around it and reforest it. Because right now, there's no understory there, just a bunch of trunks.
And why is there no understory?
Because the water, as it sheets from the road over the site, it just takes everything out, except for vines. The water builds up back here, comes right down, that's what's created this ravine. You can actually see the water, it ends up down here, just leaves whatever, you know.
And that water comes from the road?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and how are you gonna divert that water?
Well, that water's gonna be picked up and put in holding tanks, dry wells. They're shown.
Could you give me an idea of how far into the slope you're going to have to cut?
I don't know if you can see it here.
It's approximately 15 feet from where the existing house now is. We're going 15 feet into the property behind the house.
15.
Roughly 15, because it's not exactly square, so it's 15 at the most extreme point.
How high,
Here's the face of the house currently, right here. This line, this is the footprint of the existing house. The tool shed. And
That's 15 feet on the
coming this way.
east side.
On the south
South
side.
side.
Yeah, right, on the south side, but the east side
Yes,
of
the
the
east
house.
corner, yes.
But on the west corner, it's gonna be somewhat more than that.
how high a wall will that create in that slope?
The width of the house is 35 feet.
This way.
how do you propose to maintain that, the height of that slope?
So from the construction protocol, David Rhodes has developed a system.
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I
Yes,
can hardly.
David Rhodes has developed a system where the sheet pile is driven in. We'll have it marked out by the surveyor. It's driven into, I think, 2 feet above the existing topography. Once the foundation is created, it will be cut down to grade, so you won't see the sheet piling, but it will remain there and it will hold the soil in place. So the idea is not to disturb the soil beyond the sheet piling. And then the natural topography that's there, the knolls and the valleys and all that will remain. And whatever trees we don't disturb will also remain. I think there's one tree in the footprint of the house right now that won't survive. But it is a tree that's pretty much smack dab in the middle of wherever we might build, so.
I just have an opinion question for you. Your base, first floor is going to be 1,470 square feet,
That's correct.
and you're going up one floor,
That's correct.
so you're going to be approximately 29 and change.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a moderately sized house for that
Well,
particular?
no,
I think
they're
it's-
talking about being, not using full second story, so it's gonna be 25-40,
Oh, 25, 40.
25-40 instead of the 29.
Yes, the second floor is slightly smaller than the first floor, but the size of the house is very comparable to the newer construction in this area of the houses up and down Noyak Bay. We looked at the houses from where the condominiums are in the corner, where the water side was, up until about 5 houses, I think, past our site, which is where the lots get much larger, and I don't think are very comparable to what we're working
And
with.
much higher and flatter.
Yes.
I would consider this a large house for that particular parcel in that area.
Okay,
But that's just my opinion.
I understand.
Question for the architect. You have talked to the Howells and what they want to build, and you spoke about a traditional house is what he's looking for. Did you have any discussion about a modern house?
Well, I asked him about that right in the beginning, because this seems to be the trend out here.
And talking to the microphone, please, because it has to be picked up.
Yes, I talked to the Howells about it early on, and I said, they spent a lot of time in California as well. I said, you know, I'm not sure architecturally what's going on there, and I'm not sure if you're that aware of what's going on here. You've been, you know, traveling a lot. You're gonna be here now, spending a lot of time here. Would you like a traditional house, or would you like one more contemporary design? Flatter roofs, a lot more glass, a different approach, different style. They said they definitely wanted to do a Hampton-esque kind of traditional house. That's what their families had here for 100 years.
When I look at this, what I think about is, and this contemporary or traditional is, they're adjectives that are way short of what I'm trying to communicate. But what I look at here is, how can living quarters be created in concert with the natural effects? And what I see is a very steep slope, particularly on the west side, where approximately from the middle of the house to the south end, there's about 20 feet with about 11 foot or 10 or 11 foot grade difference. It's almost like putting a square peg in a round hole. How are you gonna do something there? I mean, you're not gonna open up the window to a,
No, the design, the portion of the house here that is backing into the slope does not have window. There's a bathroom, there's a storage, and the bedrooms that are here face out, and they have plenty of height for windows, normal height windows. And the great room is on the front. Yeah, this is the existing house. You walk behind it right now, and then the slope starts going up. The only place the slope is rather severe is kind of in the center.
what catches my attention is actually the upper part of that drawing. Which, come on down a little bit, go to the south, right there, from the southwest corner to halfway up on that line. that is the steepest part of where the house is proposed to be constructed. And I can't visualize how you're gonna create a house of what we think about as traditional that has any way to fit in those places.
Well, we didn't bring any architectural drawings.
But I think about a house that's gonna have a window in it, you pick up a window and you're gonna see,
Right here, there's actually a laundry.
So when you're coming
Okay.
down, when you're descending from the driveway towards the house, it looks like a one-story house, because the earth does come up to the back of the house, and the utilities are on the back side of the house. So we have a laundry room back there. I believe we have a mechanical room back there. So there's no windows back there. So when you're coming in, it looks like a one-story house from the road. On the water side, it looks like a two-story house. So there's we're going down with the grade, where the windows are placed and where the concrete begins and ends. All depends on where the grade is. Does that make sense?
well, you're trying to create a traditional look on an untraditional lot. Because most of the Hamptons' traditional houses are built on relatively flat terrain.
That is correct.
And you have some of the steepest terrain on Long Island in your front yard.
Right.
And you wanna do the same traditional house. I think it begs for something different. I don't know what that difference is, but I think there are opportunities in this house that have not been explored. Whether the owner wants to go there or not, I don't know. But when I look at this, it looks like it's a misfit. Not questioning your work, that's not where I'm going. I'm just looking at, here we are, and you wanna put this same house in the unusual lot. This is, I've been on this board a long time, and I can't recall any application that has a slope like this, that's this steep, where there's gonna be such construction. I'm not saying you can't do it.
Challenging, of course, but I think we have working with Mr. Shea in the beginning, don't come from the street, don't destroy the site really to build a house. Come from the water, move it, we've done all these things. And the way it has been designed, and I guess we should be having these plans here, you could see that these areas back here are not affected by the slope. They don't need big windows, they're looking, they're mechanical, they're laundries, things like that. But from the road, what you're actually going to see when you look at this will be gabled roofs.
Can you
They're
stand
very
behind the
interesting. Sorry.
Well, I doubt if you'll be able to see that from the road.
You'll see the upper portion of it.
It's gonna be that big, huh?
No, if
Most
you
of
drive
those-
there now,
Most of those cottages that are there now, you can't see from the road unless you peer over.
well, almost, one house next to us, and for about 5 in a row, they all have a fence. But if you look at it, I just kayaked across there again over the weekend, and they're all gables, and some of them, a couple of them are quite nice, and others have been patched and built, and over the years, they're not so.
But right along where your cottage exists now,
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 houses, I don't think there's been any kind of new construction there in a very long time.
There's
And
one,
When you talk
5.
about the owner wanting a traditional house, the tradition of the house that's there now, and this, and going towards the tradition of this house, in my opinion, really begs the question about tradition. I don't see this as a traditional house in that spot on that lot.
Well, if you look at,
You're defining traditional differently, one way for the land, one way for the house. So you're at odds with each other.
maybe it shouldn't be the word traditional, but not, he didn't want a contemporary box,
You know, I
which
think
would
the
be
house-
totally
Yeah.
different from every other house on that grouping. They all have gables, they all have detail. Even the latest one was built probably 5 years ago, it's about 5 houses down, it's a huge one. It's full of detail, it's not a contemporary.
Which house would that be?
Which guy's that?
I think that's 3645 Noyak Road. It was updated in 2007 and is 1,738 square feet in footprint and is a 3,400 square foot total gross floor area. So it's quite large.
Do you have a name on it?
The current owner is Melitsky, but I don't know if that was the owner who did the construction. I think it may have been Dade?
Well, there is an area there where there are large houses, but that's much higher on the road, and the land was much flatter.
Right.
There was no slope that it was built on, okay?
Well, the ones we've identified here are it's their own grouping, you know, they're all up at the top. They're all high.
The elevation difference between the ground level at the north end of the house, proposed house, to the property at the road is about 25 feet in elevation. That's why it's gonna be difficult to see much from the road. No matter what you do
You will
here.
only see the ridge of the roof.
Yeah.
That's what you'll see from the road. Our second floor elevation is at, what, 25 feet?
14 and
No, that's
11?
the first floor, is 14, so.
And 11, 25.
Right, 25 feet. So that's significantly below the road. The road is at 34 feet, I believe?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But then you have the roof,
right.
and it's a gable.
Marty, you wanna say something?
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. You know, I'm listening to all this, and I'm looking at this survey, and something which is yet very unclear to me is the extent of area that's gonna have to be disturbed. The plan is just showing the footprint of the house. It's not showing the amount of clearing or regrading that would be necessary in order to build a house of that size in that position, cutting into the slope. So we had previously asked for a plan showing proposed grades. I mean, you can't build this footprint without disturbing a large area around the periphery of this home. So it would certainly be beneficial to me if the applicant could speak to how much of the outer periphery in terms of the sloping terrain and naturally vegetated area would have to be disturbed in order to build the house with a footprint of this size in this location, because that's not shown on this plan. Thank you.
My name is David Rhodes. I'm with TF Engineering in Sag Harbor. To answer your question, Marty, is the way you construct that is you put a sheet pile wall, goes vertical, and then once it's in place, you excavate up to that, and you pour the foundation to it. It's typical of what they do in the cities all the time, where you have 0 lot lines and you go down 6, 7 floors. Same technology as they do in the city. That's what we're proposing to do here. Does that make sense? So the first time we proposed something, if you remember, we showed what a layback would look like. And it was pretty intrusive. And that's when you didn't like that approach, and so we came back with this approach to minimize any layback. It's gonna be complete vertical excavations. The other question, there was a question on drainage. How are we dealing with the drainage coming off the street? So the wall up at the driveway actually has an elevated 6-inch elevated top on it, so that any drainage coming off would get stopped by the wall and go to a dry well at the top and percolate in. There is a curb along that Noyak Road that takes the smaller flows and continues it down the road. There's a,
You're gonna keep a dry well on your property?
Yes.
Collect that water?
yes, yes. So there is dry well proposed right here, has to be 10 feet away from the septic system, and that would be tied into there to a low point and tied into the dry well.
Or the water comes down Noack Road.
Yeah, like I said, there is a curb there that stops a lot of the flow. There's also an area right here where it overflows and comes right down through there. So, upstream, a lot of the water is deviated off before it even hits our property. And as far as the septic system, I agree with Marty, we do need variances, but if we didn't ask for variances from the county, we would have to push the wall further out into that area, and which would impact that middle area more. So this wall would have to come out more, and the septic system would have to come up more there. So we'd be impacting that area we're trying to preserve. So we're willing to go for the variances from the health department in order to alleviate any disturbance in that middle area. And then I think the other item is we've got storm drainage chambers that were proposed to take the roof drainage and put it down there, so all roof drainage would go down there. And in the middle area, as Marty talked about, we could propose a planting plan that would help mitigate any runoff from the wall down towards the water end. And that would help mitigate any erosion of the bank on the middle side.
Have you calculated how many cubic yards would have to be excavated to make room for the house?
We have not done that at this point, no. Or,
What would be the plan of, where would that excavated material be placed?
as you look at our construction protocol, any export would be put on barges and hauled off to an off-site facility. And then it's all filled up in the driveway area. It would be excavated here, run out to a barge, barged off, and transported to an off-site facility. And that's all identified in the construction protocol. And I think we do have a earthwork number in there. I just don't recall what it is.
So to do that excavation would require some heavy machinery, I presume. How would that be put on site?
Again, all the, it wouldn't have to be that big of equipment. It could be a small excavator that would be barged in and run up off the barge into this area. Anything dealing with the house, all has to come from the water side. When we first started the project, the original contractor said that they could not barge anything in. And so if we couldn't barge anything in, the plan was to do a platform up top, do another working platform down, one level down, putting cranes in there, and then lowering everything down. So in order to alleviate those working platforms, we could do it with much smaller equipment, come from the water side and just excavate it off and export it on the barges.
I'm not questioning your engineering skill or abilities, but why do I have a hard time trusting that wall that you're going to create with the piling, holding it up?
They do it all the time.
I haven't seen that out here. Can you give me a spot
It
with
was proposed in the earlier plan, and it was just slightly different.
No, I mean, is there somewhere out here that they've actually done something like this that I could go take a look at?
I don't know of one off the top of my head, but it's an engineering practice that's used all over the United States. It's done in the city all the time. A lot of times, sometimes if it gets too tall and you want to reduce your sheet pile, you can do what they call tiebacks, where you actually pin it and then that retains it temporarily. And the whole idea is just to hold the soil on a temporary basis, because then as soon as you pour the foundation, that gets poured up against that footing, that sheet pile wall. And then as soon as the foundation's set, then you don't even need the sheet pile anymore. You cut it off and it stays below grade and you don't see it anymore. 230 Montauk Highway, they did one out there. They did two of them out there. They did a previous one. and then they came back and did a second one to do a reconstruction.
230 Montauk Avenue.
Montauk Highway out in East Hampton.
So how do you actually move that debris that you'll be excavating to make room for the house onto the barge?
There is if you look at the construction protocol, there is a construction entrance that's gonna be right there. That things will be, you know, a ramp up, and then they'll have a little construction entrance where they run the equipment back and forth, they'll run the materials back and forth.
So you'll have an excavator to do the actual digging,
Mm-hmm.
and then a truck?
No, they'll excavate it right onto the barge and haul it off. So they'll probably have they'll excavate it, they'll have little bobcats that haul the dirt out onto the barge.
Okay.
And we're not talking about a lot of dirt here, it's not that much dirt.
So basically, you're saying that whatever you put into the backhoe or anything else is gonna be making trips back and forth to the barge
Yes.
from this area they're digging?
Correct.
How many trips would you estimate?
It's in the protocol.
Okay.
They probably use a skid steer to take half a yard at a time. I think the number's gonna be large.
Are you going to be removing the existing house the same way?
Yes. Be broken down into small pieces, brought out onto the barge and hauled off as well. Yeah, the alternative is to do everything from the street, but then that means the entire area between the street down to the house has to
Somebody
be
probably get
obliterated.
shot.
So it's one way or another,
I mean, you'd have such a traffic jam, it would be unbelievable.
yes.
That's
Any
what I
other-
meant
any
by
other
that
questions?
statement.
So you don't have that number of how many yards you're gonna move on site?
I'll look for it and I'll get it for you. It's in the construction protocol. I know it's on the plan. I don't have it in my head. Four hundred and 18 cubic yards.
418 cubic yards of material is gonna be excavated
For the foundation, yes.
off-site. Half a yard of bucket, which is a typical skid steer bucket, that's, about 800 trips.
We'll get a good workout.
Question is where we go on this.
I would like to see the project downsized.
Well, I would too. Well, I don't like the idea of digging into that steep slope and ending up with just essentially what they used to do with making potato cellars for storing potatoes back 50 years ago and longer.
Mm-hmm.
I know with enough time and money, you can do almost anything. I'm not sure it's wise to do all that. But yet, I don't know what the alternatives are here. If you wanna build such a big house in that particular location of that particular style. I think there are opportunities to be creative, and, for example, suppose when you design this house, your given is, you don't excavate more than, say, a 3-foot foundation, a typical foundation somewhere, or even less than that, but you use the existing slopes to your advantage instead of disadvantage. Right now, you're fighting the design, the layout of this land. But I don't know how all that can be done. You're the architect. You went to school for all that. And you gotta talk to your client and see what he wants to do. It'd be nice if he was open to some other things that would allow for less excavation. We get excited on flat land where they bring in 400 yards of material. And we try to get the applicant to reduce that. This is the opposite. This is taking things away. And I don't know what the impacts, environmental impacts are long-term for that kind of activity. Like, suppose it was a great room downstairs and the 4 bedrooms upstairs that, I wouldn't use the word cantilevered, but suppose the second story was bigger than the first story. And I've seen houses that way, where, the second story extended even further back to, be at the level of the existing grade that would allow for preserving the grade under that until it reached the first story, where the first story could have just as much space as you need for the great room or, and other rooms that you have planned for that house. And, you know, and I'm going way beyond my pay grade here, because I don't do architecture. But what I look at is, how do we work in concert with the environmental aspects of what we're working with? And what I see here is, we're trying to tame it. We're trying to take our machinery and use a lot of money and time and make this into what we want to create, instead of creating something that's already there and using what's there to advantage. So that's the concept, that's the way I'm thinking. I don't know if any of that resonates with you or not. But are you at least open to exploring that, or something along those lines?
Of course, we'll take your comments back to our client.
That's all I could ask at this point.
Would the owner object to going down and taking a look at the property?
Well, actually, I would invite you to come take a look at the property. I think you kind of need to walk it to understand it.
Thank you.
It is not an easy place to find. Mr. Shea will attest to that. I would recommend you park on Spring Lane if it's okay with Mr. Steluca and carefully cross the street.
Private. But yes, you're welcome to park there.
Are you at the top of Spring Lane?
Yes.
Nice house.
And if you would like one of us to meet you there, just give me a call. I'm happy to make the time to meet someone there.
That's not necessary,
Okay.
but if that issue should arise, I'll definitely get in touch with you.
Okay. I'm just.
Please give him my phone number too, because I'm 2 minutes.
I'll walk up.
Right.
We need to adjourn this for a little bit. Any other questions by any board member? Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak in this application? How long should we adjourn this for?
Do you have space on your July 26th meeting?
We do.
How about July 26th? That will give us time to speak to our clients and see what we might be able to come back to you with.
Is there a motion to adjourn to July 26th?
So move.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
A019131 Lynn Crew Revocable Trust, the applicant requests adjournment to September 13th, 2023. Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak in this application? Is there a motion to adjourn?
1 minute, please. This is 10 adjournments already. And this thing's been going on for almost 3 years. So what is the longest date we can give them, Marty?
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental
Did you get a
Analyst
call
for the
from
town.
Tom tonight?
He said he's.
The applicant has indicated recently that he has a new plan that he's going to forward to us. He just late yesterday submitted a 2 or 3 page statement, which I think is a description of the plan that's gonna be submitted. So, you know, I would hope that that plan is delivered to us soon. So, the applicant, you know, the applicant spoke to Karina about what his preferred adjournment date is. So he's indicating that they're coming forward with a different plan, but he hasn't submitted that to me yet.
Again, I'm gonna ask the question, what is the furthest date we can give him?
Well, you know, the date that we, the date that we put on the agenda is his preferred date, so it's the
What-
board's
Preferred date to
decision.
who? The applicant?
Yeah,
Well, he had 10 times he could have come here, and he adjourned 10 different times. So, I mean, if it was up to me, I would give him a date in December, because this is crazy. The number of adjournments is not right.
I would recommend a shorter adjournment period.
Jerry,
Thank you.
I hear what you say, I understand what you're thinking. But this particular application is somewhat complex. There are even some parallels to the hearing we had last time with those two where they wanted to put a rock revetment up, and there's all that dredging.
Yeah.
They have some of the same conflicts with where we're trying to push this and what they want to do. And I think the DEC is also involved in this one too. And then they've also changed agents, changed their people and their team. I think we should appease them at least on this case and do the September 13th. Particularly since they have a plan that's, sounds like it's fairly close to being able to be presented. And let's see what happens next time.
Yes, I would cut them slack for one more meeting. This has been one more meeting in September, which is what they want. Will give them 3 years since they started this application.
Right.
That's a long time.
You're right, it is. But it's also not a normal application. So let's do it one more time, and then let's perhaps have a discussion if we don't get some fruit.
I hope we get some normal application. All right, motion.
Motion to adjourn until September 13th.
Hold on, Jerry, you okay with that?
No. I'm gonna decline, because I think that this date should be further out.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn until September 13th.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Vote.
Next time, if they don't come through, I'm with you.
Me too.
Excuses.
A 021097, Dilip Patel and Sabjit Kaur Dilhan. I didn't do well in your name, I'm sorry.
No, I wasn't mine. That was the one we put there. That was good.
We could do that to your name too, you know.
I think it's okay. Good evening, board members. My name is Gabriel Gombana with Schiffer Engineering. And from the last hearing for 147 Edgemere, which is currently owned by a family with 2 children, has 3 bedrooms, and is approximately on a 46,472 square foot lot with a pond that covers most of it, which is approximately around 20,000 square feet. From the last hearing, we were asked to study alternatives to the addition we were proposing. However, after studying those options, which were to put it on the bay side, we realized that the existing double-heighted space on the interior causes controversy to put it on the bay side and would cause more demolition and more construction, as well as demolition of the deck and so on. Ultimately, the addition on the side that we are proposing has the least demolition and construction on that west side. To try and maximize the dwelling setbacks, we have also looked to push the property a little bit more to the bay side, while previously it was in line with the front of the house, now going back approximately 3 feet. As well as making the proposed pool smaller, which we did have at 25 feet by 9 foot, and now we're proposing to bring it down to 20 foot by 9. As well as removing the non-native vegetation that is around the existing deck and leaving the deck that's there that's still wood. Also, upon the study, we also looked at relocating the septic system. The last time we were here, the septic system we did look at, that was in the 25-foot buffer, that was part of the covenants. After talking to Marty and coming up with some studies, we realized that there were mainly 2 options that we could go with. One option was to put it on the northern side. However, that was more minimal in the setbacks from that buffer. So the next study we looked at putting it under the driveway and closer to that addition, while still meeting the health department setbacks. While doing this, we do realize that we need to put a metal caps over to bear the weight of the vehicles, as well as remove a section of that driveway to clear that buffer and get the buffer back to what was previously approved or on the covenants. With that, we also are looking to remove non-native vegetation on the front and rear yard as stated before, as well as plant native vegetation to match the northern property to the neighbor. With all that being said, we also looked at erosion control and plan to, with this construction, also provide silt fencing along the pond to not cause any interference with the pond. Thank you.
Good evening, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. I have been working steadily with the applicant in order to revise the initial plans that have come before you. It's well described by the applicant. The current plan that is being presented tonight addresses many, if not all, of the issues of concern with this application. As indicated, there is an existing covenanted naturally vegetated buffer that was required, that extends 25 feet away from the pond. Under a prior ownership, the landowner had sited his septic system partially in that buffer, and also constructed a drive encroaching greatly within that buffer. The plan that is before you now would resolve those issues by cutting back the existing drive so that no portion would be in the buffer, and by abandoning the existing septic system with its buffer encroachments and putting in a new IAOWTS largely under the footprint of the reconfigured drive. As indicated by the applicant and as required by section 325-9D of the code, We looked at practicable alternatives in terms of construction of the addition. As indicated, we looked at whether or not that addition could be built on the bay side of the home, which would be landward of the interior freshwater wetlands and at a significant distance from the bay. However, that strategy, as indicated, was problematic because of the current design of the house, and as mentioned, would require substantial demolition and reconstruction of the existing home. So we look to stay with the plan where the addition would be constructed on the west side of the house. There are dry wells that would be installed for catchment and recharge of roof runoff. When the application was initially put forward, my recommendations not only called for restoration of that buffer around the periphery of the pond, but also asked for establishment of an expansive buffer on the bay side. The majority of the bayfront is pure white sand, but as the grades ascend, you have an area that is appropriate for establishing native vegetation. The house, the abutting house to the east had come before this board, and the board had required a large buffer on the bay side with a higher corridor of natural vegetation. So using those plans as model, I provided the applicant with a sketch showing an expansive buffer on the bay side, wherein the upper portion would be naturally vegetated. The plans which are before you now are consistent with those recommendations. The applicant has also agreed to install a saltwater pool, thereby averting any concerns about chlorinated water getting into the freshwater pond. The pool, as shown, would be on the landward side of the house, the opposite side of the house from the pond. They are minimizing the deck space, utilizing the existing deck as much as possible. And lastly, consistent with my recommendations, they have decided to come forward with a native landscape plan for the remainder of the property outside of the recommended buffers. The property, as depicted in the photos, is largely naturalized already. In fact, some of the existing foundation plantings are indeed native right now, so they would just be switching out some of the non-natives with natives. So I think the plan that is before you works well for the site and will certainly enhance protection of the wetlands, both on the bay side and in the interior, not only through establishment of covenanted naturally vegetated buffers, but by installation of the nitrogen-reducing innovative alternative on-site wastewater treatment system. The current septic system is a conventional system, so it's certainly leaching into that freshwater pond, which of course poses a lot of issues for aquatic life. We had looked at whether or not the IA could be shifted to the west side of the house, but that would inhibit their ability to expand the home. Considering the size of the property and the existing home, I don't think that it's unreasonable to allow for some expansion of this dwelling. So I am satisfied with the new plans that are before you. And the applicant will look to transfer this information to a survey, draft necessary covenants, and work with my office on native revegetation and native landscape plan. That being said, you can close the hearing tonight and look to act on this application at the next meeting.
One question, Marty.
Yes.
Is the applicant agreeable to the IA?
Yes, it's right on the
Yes,
plan.
okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Is there anyone in the public who'd like to speak on this application?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022017, Gary DeLeva and others. Are you here for either of them?
Yeah, let me just check with you. Hold on.
Do you have any affidavits?
No.
Without the
Now, Green had
affidavits,
even sent a reminder email to the applicant.
without the affidavits, we do not have authority to open that public hearing. So we'll pass that by. However, that does need some attention outside of the public hearing process.
They're going to have to put in an application to request a new hearing poster, an affidavit, and a new date, and that will have to be published in the paper, and they will have to come and pick up the poster and do the mailings the next hearing date. But they have to make the application for a new hearing date.
Yeah, it's called a hearing renotice.
Renotice.
In this particular application, the DEC is likely gonna be involved, and I wonder if it would be appropriate or possible to alert them to that so that they could perhaps go there first.
I can certainly reach out to the applicant by email and encourage him to meet with the DEC. And if beneficial, I will make myself available if they think a joint site meeting would be helpful.
Thank you.
So right now, this is just kind of held in abeyance. We don't have to do anything.
Okay. Yeah, because likely, if they don't go to the DEC first, we'll likely not be able to move forward until they do. So it'd be good for them to do this, them first, DEC first, or at least simultaneously. Okay, so now we'll go to advisory reports for planning board, Aaron Sachs subdivision.
With the decision on the or we'll take action.
Thanks,
Good night.
Good night.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This is a pending final subdivision plan for a two-lot subdivision for a tract that contains an existing home adjacent to the East Quogue Green on Lewis Road. There are several recommended comments. The first indicates that the subject tract contains mature oak woods that are adjacent to the town-owned park known as the East Quogue Village Green. And those woodlands provide a host of benefits, inclusive of carbon sequestration, biological filtration, community character, and wildlife habitat. Accordingly, consistent with the Conservation Board's prior May 11, 2022 advisory report, a conservation easement or covenant in naturally vegetated buffer needs to be established extending approximately 35 feet south of northerly lot lines in order to protect the existing woods as well as to afford a deer movement corridor through that area. Second, as the tract is located within the Weesaw Creek watershed as well as within the town high priority water quality improvement zone. Residential construction on the new lot, Lot 2, as well as any substantial redevelopment of the roadside Lot 1 needs to be conditioned upon installation of an IA OWTS with those requirements cited on the subdivision map. Thirdly, the track is located within 1.5 miles of a known summer occurrence of federally endangered northern long-eared bat. As such, the applicant needs to seek guidance from the DEC regarding restrictions on allowable clearing and tree removal. Any requirements as set forth by the DEC also need to be noted on the subdivision map. And lastly, due to the track's adjacency to a town-owned park, the recommendation is made that the existing evergreen hedgerow along the southerly lot lines be retained in order to provide screening between the residences and the park space.
Move to send these comments to the planning board?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, with the ZBA, Charles Trump III.
This application relates to a property that contains an ephemeral freshwater stream which acts as the headwaters for Onek Creek. The stream is regulated as freshwater wetlands. The second comment indicates that the survey that has been filed with the pending variance application has already been approved by this board pursuant to wetland permit number CB 22015. It also indicates that that permit granted approval to construct a residential two-story addition, a screen porch, patio, swimming pool, and pool house. And third comment indicates that we have not looked at compatibility with the building and zoning variance standards.
Move to send these comments to the ZBA?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, Eugenio Presta.
The recommended advisory comments indicate that the property has frontage on Mauritius Bay, contains state and town regulated tidal wetlands. It also indicates that the survey that has been filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals has been approved by this board pursuant to permit number CB 23009. That permit was granted in order to allow for demolition and reconstruction of the existing decks, renovation of the dwelling, as well as building of a second-story addition and porch. And lastly, the separate variance criteria have not been considered by this board.
Vote to send the comments to the ZBA?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The administrative wetland permits for your packets, resolution of conditional approval, A 021027, Marson Cuisinus and Kathleen Como Cuisinus. Any discussion?
Notation?
Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval is granted to Morrison Cuisinus and Kathleen Como Cuisinus for the proposed project by the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022028, Denise Sokolich. And this is postponed to July 12th. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Motion to postpone to July 12th? Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022051, 130 Mid-Ocean Drive LLC. Any discussion?
Notation? Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval is granted to 130 Mid-Ocean Drive LLC for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022079 Robert Vasariello and Linda Vasariello. Any discussion?
Notation?
Move to issue?
Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Robert Vascariello and Linda Vascariello for the proposed project upon terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022097, the O'Connell Family Irrevocable Living Trust. Any discussion?
Move to issue. Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to the O'Connell Family Irrevocable Living Trust for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023017, Richard Most. Any discussion?
Move to issue. Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland approval granted to Richard Mills for the proposed project in the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Preliminary review circuit determinations, A 021076, Nicholas Christopher and Penelope Christopher, postponed to July 12th. Is there a motion?
Motion to postpone to July 12th?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022012, Jaretti Fufa, postponed to July 12th.
Motion to postpone to July 12th.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? A 022072, Eric Stegich and Diana Weiss.
This application relates to an existing residentially developed property on Seascape Lane in the village of Sagaponic. The property contains village regulated tidal wetlands. This is a redevelopment plan. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated June 21, 2022. The report indicates that, consistent with our recommendations, the applicant has come forward with a plan for establishment of a covenanted wetland preservation area, naturally vegetated buffer, the disturbed portions of which will be reclaimed by planting native vegetation. These restricted areas will be covenanted as well. The new residents will be equipped with an IAOWTS. This is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to chapter 225 of the Code of the Village of Sagaponic. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022082, Erlinda Bildner, postponed to July 12th. Is there a motion?
Motion to postpone to July 12th?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023005, Kevin Fitzpatrick and Christina Fitzpatrick.
This application relates to an existing developed property in the hamlet of West Hampton. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated June 21, 2023. The property benefits by a rear deck and pool. The applicant is looking to demolish and replace the existing elevated pool with an at-grade pool. On visiting the property, I found that significant portions of the required surface water quality control buffer on the property had been cleared, modified to establish lawn and landscaping, and there was also an unauthorized discharge pipe and considerable landscape debris that had been discarded in that restricted area. That being said, the applicant has agreed to come forward with a full restoration plan for that area and to file new covenants reflective of the current wetland conditions and a compliant buffer. There are no issues with the pool, as it would be compliant in terms of setbacks. This is an application for which we have sufficient information, make a determination as such, recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to chapter 325, section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023014, James Cornwell and Donna Cornwell.
This application relates to an existing residentially developed lot at Corp Road South in the hamlet of North Sea. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated June 27, 2023. The application was made in order to convert existing attached garage to living area, to upgrade the sanitary system, and to construct a landwood addition. as well as a new entry porch. The residence is backed by forested wetlands and a hardwood swamp. The property under its prior ownership was changed so that portions of a previously required wetland buffer have been cleared and are being maintained as lawn. A larger deck was constructed than this board had authorized in prior years as well. So my office has come forward with a plan for a new buffer on the site, which is generally consistent with or greater in scope than what this board had previously required. The disturbed portions would be reclaimed with native vegetation. There were several sheds, non-compliant sheds on the property. I had already asked the applicant to go forward and remove those sheds, which was done while this application was under review. There are some additional items that need to be shown on the survey. The applicant has agreed to file a new covenant consistent with the large reclaimed buffer on the site. This is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to chapter 325, section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023019, Brian Farrell as trustee of the Joseph G. Farrell Jr. Irrevocable Children's Trust.
This is a vacant forested parcel with frontage on Fish Cove and associated tidal wetlands that gets access from a private road. The application was filed in order to get this board's approval to build a small home on the site. The applicant has agreed to all of our recommendations in terms of keeping the scale of that home reasonable. It would be a rooftop deck with a small hot tub. An IA would be installed. The small drive would be pervious, and the remainder of the property would be covenanted as a wetland preservation area and naturally vegetated wetland, non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer consistent with our recommendations. This is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to chapter 325, section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor? Opposed? A 023022, Jerome Savadier. How do we do that, Ann?
Who are you?
How do you pronounce that name? Savadier? Okay.
Where is it here?
And that's postponed to July 12th.
No, I didn't see how it was spelled.
Is there a motion to postpone to July 12th?
Motion to
So
postpone.
moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I didn't
Opposed?
see that here.
A 023028, Joshua Field and Paula Field.
This application relates to a residentially developed piece on Lake Drive in the Ameren North Side. There is a small home on the lot, an expansive meadow that goes down to tidal and freshwater wetlands. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated June 21, 2023. The applicant had only recently received an approval from this board to go forward with a redevelopment plan. However, they decided to abandon those plans because of the cost of the redevelopment. And now they're simply coming forward with a plan for an elevated second floor deck atop an existing concrete and stone patio. I did have an opportunity to meet with the landowner again at the property. At that time, we scoped out a sizable buffer that would be appropriate for this property. The applicant is looking forward to revegetating that area and will be covenanted that area as well. Consequently, there are no significant remaining issues with this application, and the board does have sufficient information to make a determination. Accordingly, I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second?
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to chapter 325, section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023032, Jay Schneider and Randy Schneider.
This application relates to a residentially developed piece with frontage on Lovely Pond. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated June 20, 2023. There were various accessory and hardscape improvements made at the property without the requisite wetland and building permits that need to be legalized. As part of that legalization, the applicant has also decided to come forward with a septic upgrade that'll be beneficial in terms of Lily Pond. The house is separated from the pond by very extensive forest. The applicant has agreed to put all those areas in preservation through filing of a covenant, so that the final plan for this site will be consistent with the wetland permit issuance standards, and ensure that this portion of Lily Pond is preserved well into the future. There is sufficient information to make a determination on this application. As such, I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second?
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to chapter 325, section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022006, Simon Halgarten and Robin Footlick.
This property had recently come to this board under a prior ownership. The board had granted a conditional approval to redevelop the property, conditioned upon establishment of a wetland preservation area and covenanted naturally vegetated wetland buffer. The new owners are amenable to those requirements, but have come forward with a plan that has downsized the new residence, which does not pose any issues in terms of potential additional adverse wetland impacts. As such, this is a resolution to authorize the needed modifications to the conditional approval to allow the new owners to finish out the process and get a wetlands permit.
Motion to issue modification?
Second?
Resolved that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Simon Halgarten and Robin Footlick for the proposed project by the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022084, Ecolape Corp.
This request for a modified conditional approval relates to a property on Beechwood Drive in North Sea. This is a vacant forested piece of property that slopes down to freshwater wetlands. The applicant had previously come forward with a development plan that was fully compliant with respect to the required wetland construction and buffer setbacks for vacant land. They have decided to make some minor modifications to those to that plan in a manner that's still fully compliant with all the wetland permit issuance standards. So this is a resolution to grant the needed modified conditional approval in order to allow the property owner to move forward with the modified plans.
Motion to issue modification?
Second?
Resolved that a wetlands permit modification be issued to Calapia Corp. for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023003 46 Oakhurst Road LLC.
This is developed property on Oakhurst Road in Hampton Bays. When the application had initially been reviewed, I had made certain recommendations in terms of removal of the majority of an unauthorized deck and establishment of buffer. While the application was before the board, the applicant had decided to go forward. I'd like to submit an alternate plan, which I found reasonable for the property. Well, now they've rethought that and decided they want to go back to my initial recommended plan. So this is resolution to make necessary modifications to the existing conditional approval so that the applicant can go forward with project plans that are wholly consistent with the initial recommendations that I had made for this site.
Motion to issue the modification.
Second?
Resolved that a wetlands permit modification be issued to 46 Oakhurst Road LLC for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Happy Independence Day, all.